Aloha and welcome back to Talk Story with House Majority. I hope you enjoyed that segment of Art at the Capitol, and it will be back next year in some form or fashion. Our topic for today is housing, and I'm so lucky today to have with me here Vice Chair Troy Hashimoto from Maui, who's Vice Chair of our Housing Committee. Troy, you heard a little bit about the $600 million initiative. You heard Tyler's first segment. What are your thoughts on our initiative to help DHHL address their affordable housing needs, and how does it impact the larger picture of affordable housing from your perspective as Vice Chair?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Majority Leader Belatti, for having me. I'm here on behalf of my chair, Rep. Nadine Nakamura of Kauai. I think we've been a very good team this past 2 years trying to tackle a lot of housing issues. I think housing is just one of the biggest issues in the front of our minds. I think we went through COVID, but housing is back. It's more expensive than ever. I think it takes up one of the biggest portions of our monthly budgets, and it's the biggest driving factor of affordability. And so I think housing for many years to come, like it was before COVID, will be top of mind, and we're going to have to continue addressing the situation more creatively than ever. And I think it's going to take a lot of us working on that issue. And I think DHHL is a big part of that solution. And I think one of the reasons why is that DHHL goes to families who live here, all Hawaiians, where you're leasing the land, you're not owning it. So hopefully, it'll stay local in perpetuity. And so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for housing mechanisms that can stay affordable in perpetuity. And I think that's one of the ways that we'll be able to address that large and looming concern of rising cost factors. And so I think it's a no-brainer to invest in more of Department of Hawaiian Homelands and trying to open that door so that more Hawaiians can stay on the land.
Now, you said it. You've been working with Chair Nakamura over the last 2 years, and you truly are like the dynamic duo, very good chair-vice chair partnership. So, over the last 2 years and seeing what you guys have done, from a big picture perspective, you guys are really focused on addressing all aspects and all spectrums of the need for housing. Can we talk about the large chunk? I think it's the workforce housing, the 60 to 120% area median income. What are some of the things that are moving now in the legislature addressing that kind of working family group?
Right. So before the pandemic, I think the legislature really made a big commitment in trying to address housing. We had this omnibus package, and then unfortunately COVID hit. And so I think a lot of it, we still try to keep alive what we could and to move it along. But I think now it's to bring a lot of that back into focus. And I think a lot of it is in investments into our rental revolving housing fund, our dwelling unit revolving fund. And I think we're going to continue to make those necessary investments into helping developers to develop for that target group, which is between all the way from 30 to 140 AMI. We're really taking a look at, we want to create that entire spectrum. I think this year we're really focusing on the 60 to 100% area median income. For City and County of Honolulu, that is about 60 to 106,000. So 106,000 would be a family of 4. And that's really what we're trying to target, that type of family. So it's not the very low income, it's more working families that need that housing.
So what are some of the professions in this? Who specifically are we helping? Teachers,
police officers, firefighters. I think, the typical, working families that are office workers. So these are moderate incomes. I think, when you have 2 of them, though, it's starting to push you into the 140% AMI, which, because I think you think about, you have 2 people working and make 60,000 each, it's 120. So it pushes you out of the 100% area median income already. So, but there's still a lot who maybe one is a teacher and maybe one doesn't make as much. And, so you still can stay below that 106,000 for a family of 4. And so that to me is the gap group that we really need to be building for, because those are the ones that are truly looking for housing and may not be able to afford what's out there and under market rents.
So just basic mechanics, when the legislature talks about investing these monies in the rental housing revolving fund, what agency is going to it, and then what is it that they're doing? They're helping development, right? Can you explain a little bit about the mechanics of that?
Right. So it's incredibly complicated to develop one of these developments. And so I think there's a lot of methods in doing it, but the Hawaii Housing and Finance Development Corporation takes the lead. So developers go to them to seek financing mechanisms, and so they can ask HHFDC for a certain amount to complete their project. In exchange, they have to follow the income requirements for certain projects. So you'll hear in the news it's 100% affordable. I know a lot of people say, well, it's not affordable in their minds, but it's affordable in the minds of Hawaii Housing and Finance Development Corporation. And sometimes they'll do mixed developments where they'll be paying market, some will be paying, maybe 100%, maybe some 60%. So they'll mix it up a little bit in some of those developments. So it really depends on how we make some of these development work. And I think it's trying to figure out how to continue to incentivize these developers to develop more. Because I think at the end of the day, partially it's a supply and demand issue. So if we can have these financing mechanisms readily available through the state, I think it'll hopefully incentivize developers to do a little more over time.
Yeah, and then, okay, so in addition to these we're talking about $150, $200 million. We're looking at significant investments to address this gap financing through HHFDC, the Rental Housing Revolving Fund. But you folks are also focused on another portion of the housing needs. And tell me a little bit about the housing subsidies for families who are on temporary assistance or who are in the First to Work programs. Are we also looking at some of those kinds of subsidies?
Yeah, so of course we have to look at all spectrums, because this is not only a problem for working families, it's also for those who may be having problems, in terms of gaining the income that they need. So we also have to look at the lower spectrum, income spectrum as well, because they also need a lot of assistance. And those are the type of families who are the most vulnerable to going houseless, and we don't want to see that. And so we need to make tremendous investments in those type of programs. I think one of the things that Chair Nakamura really looked into this past interim before the legislative session start was she looked at the TANF program that we were running throughout the state of Hawaii. It's the temporary assistance for needy families. And she found that we weren't spending all of the funds in that program.
And these are federal funds.
These are federal funds that we get on a yearly basis. I believe it's about $95 million every single year. And we were only spending about 40-some million of it. And so there was a tremendous amount of money that was still left. I think you can stay on that program for about 60 months. Of course, the average amount of families are staying for about 24 months. And so one of the initiatives that we're pushing through this year, and we hope that it gets to the finish line, is in addition to just that initial subsidy that you would get through the TANF program, we'll also try and give you a housing subsidy, because we believe that, of course, cost of housing is going up tremendously, and so housing needs to have some type of incentive. And so we're hoping that because you can give a little bit more, maybe it'll allow someone to make their budget work in a more efficient manner.
And it's giving them a little bit more over a longer period of time so that they
That's
can
right.
then, in fact, manage their budget. And the First to Work program is getting these families into working situations.
That's right. It's all about stability, and I think these people getting onto that program are really in an unstable situation. So I think that's the goal. The goal is to make sure that they can eventually get off of it and have a successful life after that. But we want to give them that lifeline, and we believe having the combination of the two incentives will really help.
And again, it's leveraging state money with federal money.
That's right.
Right. There's another shallow subsidy program that we're looking at to address the needs of kupuna, because we know that's also another vulnerable group. Can you talk about that, Bill, a little bit?
Yeah, so I, as a co-convener of the Kupuna Caucus, we talk a lot with seniors to really understand what are the pain points that they are going through as well. And the thing that you always hear is pain points about how you have a fixed income and you don't have enough to make ends meet. And so I think one of the things, again, it's sometimes on the brink of homelessness. And so we were taking a look at a program to figure out how do we help kupuna with housing. And I think we looked at all the programs that we had. I think one school of thought was, let's create a new program with the Hawaii Housing Public Authority to see if they had any ideas on creating a new program. But we actually already have something called the Rent Supplement Program. And so we're really trying to target the Rent Supplement Program for kupuna, for 62 plus. And so we'll be able to add more into that realm of 62 plus so that there's even more subsidy for them using the Rent Supplement Program. And why we want to use the existing program is because we want to get it off the ground very quickly. The longer we wait, the longer people don't have this subsidy, and we want to make sure, again, we want to get to that stability of housing.
And what we're talking about are kupuna, 62 or older, who are homeless or are about to become homeless.
That's
so
right.
really, we're talking about some of the most vulnerable.
Instability. That's right. So that's the biggest thing. We want to make sure that we can get as many people on a stable ground as possible, as quick as we can. We know coming off of COVID, it's been very, very difficult for a lot of, all types of people. But there's so many federal programs and state programs there to assist, and we want to make sure they're deployed quickly.
So really quickly, because you mentioned the Hawaii Public Housing Authority, but there's also another funding mechanism of funding vacant units or to renovate vacant units. Can you talk about that? Because, it says 264 units, but that's units. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we found out from the Hawaii Housing Public Authority is that they have these units that are sitting there because they have to go in and they do a rotation of renovating these units so they're suitable and livable for new tenants moving into public housing. And I think they just have never been able to catch up with all of the renovations, and they have a few of these units sitting vacant, and there's 264 of them. And I think that was, in our minds, something that could easily be remedied. And so we're giving them some funding to take care of that in an efficient manner so that they can renovate it and get people in quickly. And hopefully that'll allow them to then get back into a quicker rotation of making sure that most of their units are filled and not vacant.
So it's a really good example of the kind of low-hanging fruit. Like
That's right.
let's deal with this
Yeah.
really quickly.
Yeah.
So in addition to all of these, funding opportunities, wanted to talk a little bit about some rental discrimination initiatives that you folks worked on, and you worked a lot on this. So I know that there's a bill moving, and people, are wanting to make sure that there's a supply of Section 8 housing out there. But what's the issue behind that?
Yeah, so I think the coronavirus was a big wake-up call for a lot of housing for Section 8 in terms of how do we get people into these units. I think the federal government realized this is a really good avenue to make sure to get people into units is to expand the Section 8 program. So they did. So there was what we call emergency housing vouchers, and a lot of them were administered and over a short period of time. And I think that was a very successful program. They got a lot of people into a lot of housing, but because they wanted to get it out quickly, they didn't follow their normal process. And so over the interim, we wanted to understand what were the mechanisms that were getting these people into housing very quickly and see what we could adopt into making sure that when we get back to some normalcy, when these emergency housing vouchers became just normal housing vouchers, how can we sustain people being able to get into and utilize their Section 8 vouchers? And so we put a working group together from all facets of the community, from landlords, Section 8, advocates, to those who are working at the city and the counties who also administer Section 8 vouchers. And we brought them together to really understand what are the things that we can use to incentivize getting people to take Section 8 vouchers. Because actually, if you're a landlord, you may not want to take a Section 8 voucher because there's a lot of work involved. And so I think a lot of what we came to conclude was that we needed to create a little more incentives for landlords to really want to become a partner with those who have Section 8 vouchers and to accept them in an easier manner. And so I think some of the things that we're looking at, we believe truly in incentives because we believe that Section 8 is a partnership. The landlord needs to want to rent to Section 8 tenants because you're going to have to work with them. You're going to have to work with the government agency who administers the Section 8 voucher. And so in our bill that we proposed, we really were about making sure that Section 8 landlords had protection if for some reason there was damage to their unit that was above and beyond the security deposit that we could reimburse through state funds any additional damage. So that was something that is in the bill that we are proposing and it's moving forward. In addition, we wanted to give incentives if you sign up for the Section 8 program. So we will give you a one-time signing bonus to participate in the Section 8 program. And also if there's some type of vacancy between tenants, we also want to give you some type of incentive so that you don't have to take that vacancy out of your own pocket. So those are a lot of components that are included in our incentives bill that we're moving forward that we're hoping to push more people to get involved with Section 8.
Okay, homelessness. Okay, now we have to shift to another portion of this. Homelessness in Ohana zones and this notion of creating an office on homelessness and housing solutions. Talk to me a little bit about what are some of the plans to expand Ohana zones and then this new office.
Well, Ohana Zones was obviously a creature of the legislature. I think a few years ago that was our signature program to really dig into the homeless issue. And I think to me it was very, very successful. I think there's a lot of successes through Ohana Zones. At least on Maui, we were able to renovate a vacant dorm at Maui College and turn it into transitional housing. And that was through the Ohana Zones program, utilizing some of their exemptions. We did get some help from HHFDC, but primarily it was because of Ohana Zones we were able to renovate those dorms, and now it's being used very, very, it's at capacity, so everyone loves living there. And I think there's a lot of great examples throughout the state. I believe on the Big Island, they were able to convert one of their old vacant hospitals into shelter for those who need housing. And so I think one of the big things about the Ohana Zones bill is that, number one, we need to extend what happened a few years ago. I think at the time it was kind of like a pilot program, a one and done kind of thing, but I think the successes showed that this is something we need to sustain over time. Some of the exemptions that were afforded with the initial Ohana Zones bill should be put into statute and should be utilized for other type of programs. And I think that's what's kind of encapsulated in that bill is some of the exemptions that we was utilized previously. And I think it also really needs just some type of motivation for everyone to get back onto the same page, funding wise, and also kind of thinking outside the box. Because I think at the end of the day, Ohana Zones is supposed to utilize county and state lands in a more efficient manner to help this housing instability that we're facing throughout the community. So I think if we're able to extend Ohana Zones, hopefully we'll get that excitement back. Because it's truly a partnership amongst a lot of different agencies and people and entities to really get more housing for those that are facing houselessness.
And the way I see Ohana Zones rolling out on Oahu is that it's a place where there's a lot of collaboration.
Absolutely.
And at the heart of it is the community providers, the homeless service providers, but also state and county government. And so this is where maybe the notion of an office on homelessness and housing solutions really kind of starts to crystallize. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's coming out of some of the work that you and Chair Nakamura have done.
Yeah, and I think partnerships is key for a lot of things. And I think the governor's coordinator on homelessness has done a really good job. I think he really needs to have more stability in terms of where he's at and more defined roles. And I think this is what this new bill aims to provide. And I think it's really trying to take the homelessness component and the housing component, because it's really it's together. You have to look at both issues and in a long-term view to make sure that that's happening. And I think what that bill tries to do is it really puts in a lot of thought of what is his steps and what are the things that he needs to put together to really solve the issue of this overarching homelessness problem that we have. And so I think it's a good step in the right direction. I think it gives them the appropriate staff. It gives them a line item for funding. It puts them, it's still going to be appointed by the governor. So, I think the prominence is still going to be there, but it also gives them a home in Department of Human Services permanently with the staff that he needs. And hopefully over time, he'll be able to grow and continue those partnerships. I know with the new governor, it may be someone new. So sometimes it may not be someone that has to start. It may be someone that has to start all over again. But I think most importantly, the staff that they will have will now be civil servants, because we did not want to exempt them from civil service because we felt that some people needed to have institutional knowledge moving forward within that office.
And I think that placement in Department of Human Services is so key, because you have the Medicaid program that's looking at ways to help support housing. You have the homeless support programs that are already there. So it's really a key place to place an office that's bringing people from homelessness to housing solutions.
That's right. And I think, it's really also about working with the counties. I think a lot of times, especially on the neighbor islands, the governor's homeless coordinator really had to rely on the counties to do their part. Because of course his office is not statewide, it's more Honolulu focused, and that's fine. I think bringing in the counties is really important because they have a lot of resources and they have a stake within their community, and so he really needs to dig deeper into those partnerships, and I think that it is clearly outlined in the bill as well.
Can I just tell you, in the last 20 minutes when we've been talking about housing, I feel like we've gone like everywhere on this housing issue.
Absolutely.
So I think you guys are doing a fantastic job, and I'm very excited for what we might be able to talk about. I mean, there's still going to be a lot more work, but last thoughts, last takeaways for the work of the legislature and housing from you as vice chair.
Yeah, we have a lot more things that need to get done, because housing, of course, is just something that will be a challenge for many years to come, because I think we've just been so much behind in the amount that we've developed over the past decades, and so it's really catching up now even more than ever. But I think part of it is we have to work together. It's not something that we can do alone. It's something that we're going to have to collaborate. We're going to have to continue having the conversation, and we as legislators are going to have to continue to make it top of mind, because it's that important in my mind. And I think it's working with people like you and finance chair and speaker to make sure that every year we have something that we can deliver to the people of Hawaii to show that yes, we are making some progress. And although it's a huge issue, it might take a little while to see it come to fruition. But I firmly believe that in the next 5 years, it'll look better than the last 5 years.
All right, I'm going to check in on you in 5 years, whether or not Talk Story is happening, but I will be checking in with you in 5 years. Now, you can't go away. You're going to help me close this show out. So I want to thank Vice Chair Troy Hashimoto for joining me and talking about all of these important housing initiatives. I wanted to wrap up by talking about just a few of this kind of interesting things that are still popping. And what's going to happen over the next 3 weeks is that we enter conference. Tomorrow is the 48th day of the legislative session. We have second crossover, so all the bills from the House go back to the Senate, and bills from the Senate come back to the House, and then we go into conference. Some interesting bills to keep your eye on are the Hawaii Retirement Savings Plan, and really quickly, Kupuna Caucus co-convener Troy Hashimoto, you wear multiple hats. Tell me about Hawaii Retirement Savings Program.
Yeah, I think this will allow for anyone who does not have a sponsored program to the employer to have a savings plan for retirement. And so this is really helping our young people. I know AARP is really pushing for it, but I think they're forward looking and looking that, okay, the next generation, when they become eligible members of AARP, they need to make sure that they have retirement.
We have another Kupuna Care Program bill, Senate Bill 3113. What's that bill about, and what should people be looking out for that?
Yeah, so Kupuna Care and Kupuna Caregivers, it's two different programs, but I think over the pandemic, they realized that they needed to create some efficiencies so that they could move monies around, so that the continuum of care for our kupuna is well taken care of. So this bill aims to make sure that we have big flexibility for our kupuna in terms of when we need to administer care to them.
Okay, last bill I want to talk about, and I think everyone is going to be looking at this bill as we head to the final stretch, is Senate Bill 514, which is a bill that's looking at and considering a tax rebate. So this bill is resurrecting the governor's proposal of providing rebates to every person, every resident of the state of Hawaii. And so Rep. Hashimoto, an extra $100 in a constituent's pocket, what does that mean?
I think in these times with inflation and prices going up, I think it means a whole lot. And I think I'm very thankful that the legislature is able to figure something out with this rebate. And I think it should be very exciting for a lot of people seeking relief. And
I think, what we're talking about too is we're looking at a kind of a graduated program. So for those making under $100,000, maybe a little bit more per person in their household. So keep our fingers crossed. We hope that tax rebate bill gets across the finish line. I want to thank all of you for joining us here at our second episode of Talk Story with House Majority.